All right, good afternoon. Go ahead and call to order the regular meeting for the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals for October 22nd, 2014. First item on the agenda is the consideration of minutes for our regular meeting on September 24, 2014. Those minutes are included with our agenda materials. Any changes to those minutes? If not, they will stand approved as presented, and we will consider some new business. First, a variance request. It's application Z14057 by Mr. Tyler Thomason for Harmony Homes of Tennessee. He's requesting a 10.8-foot variance from the minimum required 25-foot rear building setback. And this is for property located in a RS-12 zone at 2715 United Drive. All right, Mr. Blum, if you'd review that application for us, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Rogers, and good afternoon, Chairman Rogers and members of the board. Our first item, as you mentioned, is for a rear setback variance request at 2715 United Drive, which is located in the Bellhaven subdivision. Bellhaven is located just to the west of St. Andrews Drive, south of New Salem Highway. This particular lot the plat was recorded about 8 years ago. The subdivision's been a little bit slow to build out, but Mr. Thomason has recently constructed a single-family residence on this particular lot, and the covered porch that he built, which is an attached covered porch, a part of the principal structure, or covered patio rather, is encroaching into the rear setback by 10.8 feet. And so he has made a variance request for a 10.8-foot rear setback variance. And you can see on the overhead in front of you the location of the subject property is where the arrow is pointed to. And you can see that due to the curve of United Drive, the further south one goes on United Drive, the lots actually become shallower. And you have in your agenda materials a copy of the property survey, which has the patio cover in question shaded in. It's 16 feet deep by 18 feet wide. And as you can tell by looking at the survey, the lot is actually wider than it is deep. And so the building envelope actually lends itself more to a ranch-style house than it does a two-story house. As you can see, the side yards to either side of the existing house are generous, but the backyard, there's not much left over after you build the house and take into account that rear setback. More specifically, with the front setback at 35 feet and the rear setback at 25 feet, and the subject lot being 118 feet wide and 102 to 107 feet deep, the building envelope is nearly 100 foot wide, but only 42 to 47 feet deep. The applicant indicated because of the shallowness of the lot, it was difficult to find a house plan that would fit. And he did have a house plan that would fit, but during the process of building the house, he stated that his customer wished to have a covered patio, and that he made a mistake in not considering that a covered patio has to adhere to the rear setbacks. The patio cover in question is a roofed structure with electricity and a ceiling fan. This is a photograph that the applicant has submitted, showing the patio cover in question right here. And now the applicant has indicated that if approved, he intends to mitigate the proximity of the covered patio into the proximity of the covered patio to the rear property line by the installation of 5 Leland cypress trees, and he has submitted a printout from the internet depicting what those Leland cypress trees would look like. There is a drainage easement along the rear property line, and our engineering department has indicated that if he does wish to plant those Leland cypress trees, that they would need to be planted at the top of the bank or outside of the drainage easement entirely. If he planted them along the rear property line, they would be in the center line of the ditch, obstructing the flow of the water. So if he does decide to move forward with that, those trees would need to be in a location that would not conflict with the drainage easement, and he's certainly welcome to contact the engineering department if he has any questions about where he can or cannot locate those trees. Here are some photographs of the subject property. Here is the front of the house as it faces United Drive. The patio cover in question. Looking north at the patio cover, and you can see the stakes in the background. The rear property line is approximately, as I mentioned, along the center line of that ditch. Looking south at the patio cover. And this is the house to the rear of the subject property. And the adjacent property to the north. And the adjacent property to the south. And as I mentioned, the further south you go along United Drive, the narrower the lots get. I've actually already had a meeting with a builder about the 4 lots that are to the south of the subject property, 2 of which front on United Drive and 2 on Aristocrat Drive. And he has discussed the possibility of making application for variances on those 4 lots as well, because they are so shallow. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions before or after the public hearing. Mr. Thomason is here if you have any questions for him as well.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Any questions for Mr. Blomley? All right. Mr. Thomason, anything you'd like to add to the application?
To reiterate what Matt, you said, it is our intention to plant those Leland cypress right up against the covered patio. There's never an intention to ever close that in or make that heated space. Is to my understanding that the homeowner eventually wants to build a fence along down through there, which obviously due to setbacks and that drainage easement would not be allowed to be put in there. So that the area that's roughly 4.2 feet at the smallest area would be along where they would have to run that fence. So it would be in between that area that we planted our plants, but that's somewhere down the road is once they close on that and do that. So eventually I expect within the first year or so after homeownership that the buyer will erect a fence down through there. So, but.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Thomason? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
At this time, we're going to conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion or motion.
If there's no discussion, I'll make a motion to approve the variance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I want to say something on this one. I don't know where the difficulties lie. And it's if this was an isolated situation, I probably wouldn't have as much concern, and I was probably okay with it all the way up until that point where you talked about there's a builder that's talked about the 4 lots that are at the front of the subdivision. What I understand is that the shallowness of the properties being used to justify the requirement that there be a practical difficulty or that there be a physical feature that's unusual when compared to other properties in the same zoning district. But this subdivision was laid out, platted. I assume it was approved by the Planning Commission. I assume those require City Council approval as well.
Just Planning Commission.
Just Planning Commission approval. And so when this was built into the setback, everybody knew what the deal was, that this was a shallow lot. And the reason it was built in the setback is not because it was a shallow lot, but because the builders forgot or didn't know that this attached overhang was going to be in violation of the setback. And so, I don't think that they've proven any one of these three. And that concern is magnified, like you said, by the fact that you've got 4 more lots that are in line behind it looking for variances because of something that everybody knew on the front end what the deal was, that these were shallow lots.
Chairman Rogers, the situation on the 4 lots to the south is actually a little bit different. They have not a 10-foot drainage easement along their rear property line, but a 25-foot drainage easement. So basically, the entire rear setback for those lots is in a drainage easement, and there's a ditch that. Let me show you let's see. You can see that ditch. The drainage easement is more substantial on the properties to the south. And when I was discussing with the builder about those 4 lots, his concern was that you open up the back door and immediately there's a drop off into that ditch. So the situation on those 4 lots is a little bit different because the drainage easement does abut right up next to the building envelope. And so I think what he was looking at the possibility of was shifting the houses forward a little bit so that the back door wouldn't be opening up right into the ditch. Whereas the lot in question here only has a 10-foot drainage easement and does not have that same substantial ditch as the 4 lots to the south.
So that kind of means to me that the practical difficulties may conceivably, I'll talk about that, may conceivably apply to those 4, but it even further indicates that there's no practical difficulty with regard, or even a lesser practical difficulty with regard to this lot. And the concern being that, again, whether the drainage easement is 25 or 10 or whatever, it's a platted subdivision. It was approved by the Planning Commission. It was purchased by the builder. It was purchased by the customer who's going to own the property or whatever. It's all a matter of clear public record when they go in and buy these properties, and so I think it's extremely dangerous for builders to go in and build or advertise lots that are, where they have no buildable backyard, and hope for a variance. Because as in this case, I don't think there is one. I don't think there's grounds for one. But all right, I'll stop beating that horse. All right, any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Yes. All right. That application, Mr. Thompson, has been approved. Thank you. All right. We'll now consider application Z14058 by Mr. Clyde Roundtree of Huddleston Steel Engineering for Hearthstone Group. He's making requests for property located in a commercial highway, heavy industrial, and gateway design overlay district for zones along the south side of Hanson Court and at 906 Dashell Street. First of all, a 10-foot variance from the ordinance that requires a minimum 15-foot wide landscape yard along local streets. Secondly, a 6-foot variance from the ordinance that requires a minimum 8-foot wide side planting yard where the site is more than 2 acres and less than 5 acres. Third, a 3-foot variance from the ordinance which requires a minimum of 5-foot wide landscape strip along the base of the building. And finally, and a 12-foot variance from the ordinance which requires a minimum of 15 feet between parking or access drives. And finally, a 3-foot variance from the ordinance that requires a minimum of 10 feet between buildings and parking on lots of 1.5 acres or more. All right, Mr. Longley.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. If you thought that was a mouthful, you should have seen what all myself and the applicant went through to try to iron out all those variances. The subject property consists of 4 lots. It is property is the largest lot is located at 906 Dashel Street, which is just south of Medical Center Parkway and west of West College Street. The 3 other parcels are parcels that the applicant has under contract along the south side of Hanson Court, which is also just south of Medical Center Parkway. This project actually just went to the Planning Commission last week for initial design review and was approved for initial design review, and it's anticipated that they will be going back to the Planning Commission next month for final design review should their variances be approved today by the Board of Zoning Appeals. The Planning Commission did not express any objection to the applicant moving forward to the Board of Zoning Appeals for these variances. The subject property, the 3 lots along Hanson Court are zoned CH, Commercial Highway, and are also in the Gateway Design Overlay District number 4. And the property along Dashel Street is zoned Heavy Industrial, HI. The developer is actually in the process of renovating the building on Dashel Street, which was previously, I believe it was an industrial building, and he is converting it into a multi-tenant office building and giving it a facelift as well. I think what might be helpful is if I show you a picture of that first now before I usually show you the photographs. This is the construction that is occurring right now. You'll see the applicant is doing some facade renovations to the front of this building and also redoing the parking lot as well. And you can see the property. You can see Hanson Court and Medical Center Parkway in the background of this photograph. What the applicant desires to do in purchasing these 3 lots along Hanson Court is to build a 3-story addition to this existing 1-story building. It would be an office building, and it would actually have some meeting space on the roof, and that meeting space would be, a good bit of it would be open-air meeting spaces with pergolas and kind of an outdoor garden type feel on the roof of the building itself. The properties in question, and I'll go back to the aerial photo, you'll see that the parcels along Hanson Court are very, very shallow, and they are, and which likely has contributed to the reason why they have not been developed ever since the construction of Medical Center Parkway, is because they have very little utility. In fact, the parcel in the middle is so shallow that it has no building envelope. So the applicant is looking to combine these 3 parcels with his property at 906 Dashel. And one thing that I'll have you notice to kind of orient you, Medical Center Parkway, as many of you know, changed alignments. You know, in this area, it used to be Manson Pike, and when it was Manson Pike, you'll see Hanson Court. The right-of-way of Manson Pike and the roadbed actually followed Hanson Court right here. It went straight across, and these lots actually were as deep as the 3 commercial lots just to the west. You see where these buildings are just to the west. These lots were actually just as deep as those lots were. But when Medical Center Parkway was realigned or was constructed, the roadway was aligned further to the north, and Hanson Court was built to provide access to those existing commercial lots. But in order to provide the alignment that was needed for a T intersection with Medical Center Parkway, instead of Hanson Court going straight across like so and intersecting with Medical Center Parkway, it was curved to the south to intersect with Medical Center Parkway at a T intersection here, leaving these 3 lots here with very little utility. So by purchasing these 3 lots and combining them with the larger lot on Dashel, it still leaves some very awkward angles on this lot, a very awkward shape that in places does not lend itself very well to redevelopment, although by combining it with the larger parcel, it does make the development of these 3 lots feasible. So the applicant has made application for a number of these, or for these 5 variances, which actually apply in a number of different places. And you'll see the very complicated exhibit that you have in front of you that denotes each one of these variances. And you'll see that there are several places where variance number 1 applies, several places where variance number 2 applies, and et cetera, et cetera. So before I go over the variances, let me show you an elevation of the building itself. And this is the existing building here, and here is what the applicant wishes to build. The front of it, it will have 2 fronts, one front facing the parking lot and another more formal entrance oriented towards Hanson Court and Medical Center Parkway. And you'll see that it's 3 stories. The 3rd story is partially that open air event area with the pergolas and the landscaping on the roof. And here's the elevation with that formal elevation as it will face Hanson Court and Medical Center Parkway. So the applicant is tasked with meeting the Gateway Design Overlay District requirements, which are much more stringent than just the base zoning requirements, for this very narrow strip of land where which is the 3 lots that he has under contract. And especially with regards to the kind of northwest appendage, you'll see the area where my cursor is, near the building with the blue roof. That area is still very shallow, and it doesn't have whereas a good bit of that property, that lot line will be removed, combining it with the other properties. This area still remains very shallow, and many of the variances pertain to this northwest appendage. The exhibit that you have in front of you is a little bit difficult to project onto the screen. So what I'm going to do is kind of go over these variances from the aerial photo, so I think that will be easier to relate to what they're proposing to do. First of all, there is a 10-foot variance request from the minimum 15-foot wide front landscape yard along local streets. And that's labeled as variance number 1 on the plan in front of you. Now, bear in mind that, just to reiterate, the only portions of this site that are required to comply with the Gateway Design Overlay District regulations are the areas in those 3 lots that he is purchasing. The bulk of the property, 906 Industrial or 906 Dashiell, is not in the Gateway Design Overlay District. So the 15-foot front landscape yard along Hanson Court is required. In the area in that northwest appendage, he is only providing 5 feet, and that is because to get a row of parking in that, or to get a driveway aisle with parking on both sides, he's limited in as far as getting parking on both sides. It really puts some pinch points along those property lines on both the north, south, and west. Number 2, he's requesting a 6-foot variance from the landscape ordinance, and this is a regular Section 27 landscape ordinance requirement, not a gateway design requirement, that there be an 8-foot planting yard along the side property lines. And this applies to several areas in that northwest appendage, but it also applies to the portion of the site that is not in the Gateway Design Overlay District. The existing building, he wants to line up the building addition with the existing building so that there's no jog there. and the pad to the rear of the building will have there'll be a sidewalk as well as an HVAC pad to the rear of the building, leaving only 2 feet along that back property line, that side property line, rather. The third variance is from the requirement that there be a 5-foot wide landscape strip along the base of the building. And because that area is so narrow along the frontage of Hanson Court, the way they have designed the driveway coming into the site comes in at a does a 90-degree turn in order to access that parking in that northwest appendage, and it pinches up against that building in 2 places to where there is only a 2-foot base of building landscape strip in those 2 pinch points. The fourth variance is where there is a minimum of 15 feet of separation between parking and access drives and the adjacent lot lines. And most of those areas where he is requesting a variance is in that northwest appendage where parking is tight up in that area, as well as one location along the east lot line as well, where the property comes together at an unusual angle. Finally, the 3-foot variance from the requirement that there be 10 feet between buildings and parking and access drives are the same 2 pinch points where the base of building landscaping is not being met. You'll see where the variance number 3 and variance number 5 are in the same locations. The primary reason that the applicant has given for these variances is due to the construction of Medical Center Parkway. And as I mentioned, in order to provide access to those commercial properties, and in order to provide proper alignment from Hanson Court to Medical Center Parkway, the roadway of Hanson Court and the corresponding right-of-way lines had to dip further to the south into these vacant lots and made them of little utility on their own. I would say that the applicant is attempting to maximize their use or to give them some viable use by combining them with the subject property. On their own, they do have very little utility. And while there was relatively little impact to the size and depth of the westernmost lots along Hanson Court, these 3 lots were impacted by that road construction. And in order to, or even with the re-subdivision of these lots to combine them, the property still has an unusual shape, and there are still challenges in meeting some of those GDO zoning requirements. If the board wishes to approve these variance requests, staff recommends the following condition: a re-subdivision plat combining the 4 lots into 1 lot of record must be recorded. With that being said, I know that was a mouthful, and there's a lot of detail in this particular application, so I'll be happy to answer any questions. And Mr. Roundtree is in attendance if you have any questions for him, as is his client, Mr. Scott Graby, who is the developer.
All right. Thank you, Matthew. Any questions for Mr. Blomley?
Oh.
Go ahead.
What's the required parking spaces for this building? And
For office uses, it is 1 space for 300 square feet of floor area. And they're stating that the event area on the roof will not be coincident with the use of the property for offices, that it will be used primarily in the evening time when the offices are closed.
And have they exceeded those parking spaces? Do they meet those parking spaces? Where are they?
I believe they have 2 or 3 surplus parking spaces.
Okay.
Hey, Matthew, it's hard to see on the map there. Can you put that back up and outline for us the 3 lots?
Sure. You put the overhead back up. Do you want to see it on the aerial photo or on the...
Right there.
Okay. Do you see there is a very faint green line that goes right through the word site?
Okay.
And then it heads back up to the north, over like so, dips down, back over to the corner of this lot here, back down, and back over.
Okay. That's 3 lots in there?
That's 3 lots. The one in the middle is very tiny. It's here.
These are remnants from land that was acquired for the construction of Med Center Parkway there, and then the reconstructed the creation of Hanson Court. So they're remnants from parcels that were acquired. Yeah, which is why they're so small and such strange shapes.
Yeah, I just can't see where they're divided, where that one long lot's divided twice. Okay. And all these variances have to do with those 3 lots?
The only one that is not in those 3 lots is the side landscape yard, the second variance.
Okay.
That is being requested for the building addition, which would still be on the 906 Dashiell Street property.
Now, the existing building that's under renovation, of course, there's no request for that building, but it's being renovated in its current footprint, right?
That's correct. Well, I believe they've actually demolished a small portion of it.
Okay. But it appears that it sits just 2 feet off of the property line as it is, right?
I think the building itself is about 10 feet off the lot line, but there may be a sidewalk behind that. Mr. Ives, can I see the plan right there?
I guess the purpose being, though, the proposed building addition is going to line up with the back of the current one.
That's correct. They're looking to line it up directly with the existing building.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Baumley?
If this is re-subdivided to become 1 lot, what the zone, the requirements of the gateway design overlay does not encroach upon the rest of the...
It does not, but it's my understanding that the applicant is, in going to the Planning Commission and requesting the project as a whole, he is trying very hard, even on the portions of the property that are not in the Gateway Design Overlay District, to replicate many of the standards for the remainder of the balance of the property that is not in the Gateway Design Overlay District. And that is with architecture and other requirements. And Mr. Roundtree or Mr. Gravy may be able to speak to some of those specifics.
But there would be the re-subdividing of the property would not require further requests for variances.
That's correct. If it were not re-subdivided, then there would be the need for additional variances, because the plan that we have before us assumes that the re-subdivision will take place and is based on the lot lines as they are proposed, as opposed to the lot lines as they are right now.
Right. But there would not be any further variance requests needed due to changes in what zone that they're in if it is re-subdivided?
Not to my knowledge. And as far as the zoning would stay the same. It would remain, the property would remain split zoned, and that a portion of it would be zoned heavy industrial, and a portion of it would be zoned CH and GDO4.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Matthew, is that a good idea? To leave it when you got one building that's under 2 zones and one single platted property that has 2 different zones?
As long as the use is permitted in both zones,
I see.
There are a handful of incidents, or a handful of similar situations in Murfreesboro. As long as the use is permitted in both zones,
I'm with you. I get it. Okay.
Matthew, is it fair to say that the variances that are requested have to do with the, kind of as Julie was hitting on, the need to squeeze parking onto the property and get the required number of spaces? I mean, if they you said I think they're 2 or 3 over what they need, but if they eliminated those 2, it's still I don't know, but I wouldn't think it would eliminate the need for many, if not all, of these variance requests?
I guess it depends on how they reoriented the parking lot. I think that they would, in that northwest appendage, they would likely still need some variances. It may reduce the number of variances or the number of locations where variances are needed. But I think especially in that northwest appendage, as that's where the majority of the variances are being requested, some would still be needed.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Blomley? All right, Mr. Roundtree, Mr. Gravy, anything you all would like to add to the application? All right, then at this time, we will conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would, please come forward. And in doing so, if you would, state your name and your address for us, please.
I'm Larry Parker, and I'm at 1119 Hanson Court, and I'm speaking for Mr. Don Bruce. On the three buildings, the blue top building, that there's wanting to be a variance on they're wanting to be like 7 foot off of the property line. Actually, it's 3 foot off the building and like allowing 4 more feet or something. They're wanting to be within 7 foot of the building. There is a question I want to ask, and I know it's going to sound strong, but that lot hadn't been for sale for 14 years. Why is it getting sold now? Because Mr. Bruce has been trying to buy that lot for 14 years. 14 years. And now the lot, we need parking. We need parking in our building. And so what I don't understand is, why is the lot not for sale to Mr. Don Bruce, but now all of a sudden 14 years later it's for sale? So we do have a kind of an issue there too as well, but the variance thing, you know, it's supposed to be 15 foot or whatever the case may be, and I believe it needs to stay there, because here's what's going to happen there. We don't have any parking. Whenever you build a parking lot there, our customers are going to come in that parking lot and park. Then it's going to be a problem to the new building that's being built. You understand what I'm saying? Without some kind of something to keep it off, my customers are going to park over there. You know, so if they're needing parking, you know, we got to figure out where the happy medium is. But I guess the really kind of sort of the question is that lot's not been for sale for 14 years. Now it's for sale. Mr. Bruce wants that lot for our parking. So could we work out something where we could buy that lot? You know what I mean? I mean, I'm being honest. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I'll tell you later, we have not had that kind of request which come to the Board of Zoning Appeals before.
I apologize, but
And,
I'm just asking, you know what I'm saying? Yeah,
you're
it's hard.
fine.
It's hard, but like I said, just if you don't mind, we'd like to not allow that variance, because I'm saying that if in the occasion that they build a parking lot there, my customers are going to be in that parking lot parking, because they ain't nowhere to park in our area. So I just don't want that to be a problem somewhere along the way, you know. I hate for my customers to get towed, because it's right here. I mean, we're all right there. We're going to be jammed up. So I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
and we certainly can't answer that question about the property sale and that sort of thing.
Well, I understand that. I understand.
Yeah.
But like I said, I'm just trying to put that out there. I apologize.
I got you.
That might have been kind of wrong. But anyway, if you don't mind, we'd sure like to not allow that variance, because like I said, it's going to put those buildings right, our building right on that parking lot. And I promise you, our people are going to park in that parking lot, which is going to be a problem. If they got a record company that's going to come in there and tow people that ain't legally parked, then it'll be a problem. So we need to try to figure out how to approach that.
Okay. I mean, have you seen these diagrams? This part here?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be right off the building. It's going to be like.
But they can legally put it though within.
It's supposed to be 15-foot variance.
Yeah, I'm sorry, 15 feet, and here
the property line.
they're wanting to put it within 3 feet of the property line on this one. So you think moving it back 12 feet would solve your concern?
All I'm saying is Mr. Bruce has the right for his property line, as well as somebody else has a right for their property line. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
agree.
I'm sorry. That's what I was trying to.
Okay. All right, any questions? No, you find, any questions for Mr. Parker?
Well, where are they parking now? I mean, there's not parking available to them in
tight.
excess.
It's tight, that's what I'm saying. We just, honestly, we're having to park in the grass out front of the buildings and stuff like that right now. It's tight spots. It's tight spots, but
They're illegally parking on the city-owned property. They have been, and we've given them a notice to do it. Never
They hadn't.
taken any enforcement action.
yeah, there hadn't been any notices as far as, I don't know about that, but there ain't been no notices that I've noticed, so you know. But like I said, if we do have an issue there, then we might need that lot for parking ourselves. So could we, I mean, you know what I'm saying? We need to reevaluate this whole thing.
Yeah, that may be something you want to talk to Mr. Gravy and Mr. Roundtree about. I don't know, maybe they can work something out with you.
Well, no, it's a city property.
I'm talking about if
It's a
they,
lot.
That's not a subject for this board.
Well, but it is an issue, so I just thought, okay, I appreciate it.
thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against the application?
Well, I'm Don Bruce. I own that property next door. And I'm just going to touch real quick on, I've tried to buy that property for 14 years. Mr. Who's the city manager, Rob Lyons, told me it was never for sale. I've tried. I've asked different ones, can't you help me get that property? No. Well, anyway, back to this. It says in this ordinance that you're supposed to be 15 foot from the property line with the parking area. All right. I'm against giving them a 12-foot variance because 3 foot from the property line puts the parking lot 7 foot from my building. So our customers that does business with my tenants down through there, they don't have a place to park, but there's a big nice parking lot right next door that somebody's built. But we don't have any parking, and they do. So, you know, if when they agreed, asked to buy this property, it was my understanding that they agreed to adhere to all the gateway design property. And so if they're going to buy the property, then let them adhere to everything that they said they would do. And one thing would be deny the 12-foot variance at the end of my building.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bruce.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else present wishing to speak for or against the application?
Chairman Rogers, Commissioners, my name is Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel Engineering. And in response to Mr. Bruce's concerns and Mr. Gravy's present as well, we've been talking. We feel like we can take that pressure point off by eliminating one of the parking spaces along that edge and actually reducing the 9-foot parking bay to a compact parking bay that would give another foot or two in that area. And I think our desire, the client's desire, is to meet all the gateway standards the best way possible. There would be a decent, and we can potentially provide a pretty dense landscape buffer there as well to make sure it's not a logical place for people to park in order to get to the adjacent property. So with those concessions in mind, we'd rather not give up any more parking if possible. And Mr. Gravy's making a significant improvement upon the area. And the building itself is going to be a really nice signature element for the gateway as far as kind of introducing the whole north end. So with that in mind, those are some concessions we would be more than willing to make to try to maximize parking but eliminate the concern with the adjacent property owner.
Will you clarify those spaces that you stated earlier?
If you could look at
One more
Mr.
time.
Bruce's property, it reaches kind of deep into that corner. As Matthew said, that's a real awkward kind of alignment. And there's kind of an offset with the parking. There's one extra space along the Medical Parkway side that we could eliminate we could still keep the hammerhead in place. And then if you look on the other side, those are all 8.5-foot parking spaces, which are for compact cars. We could take the 2 9 feet out and make those compact as well. And it's not a lot, but it's something that would help us get a little bit more distance between the property and the corner of the parking lot.
Matthew, do we have a way to show on the overhead so everybody understands what exactly he is proposing?
Sure.
You think that will alleviate the 12-foot variance? Or, I mean, I see on this exhibit here, there's 104 required, and you've got 106 plus 4 handicaps proposed. You think that's going to alleviate the 12-foot variance in that section, or just lessen them?
It'll lessen the impact on
Take some
Mr.
down.
Bruce's property, and then, like I said, we can encourage some landscaping there that would make a more definitive line, if that was what we needed to make sure.
The tightest pinch point there, though, is not where those 5 parking spaces are. It's where the bump out in the parking lot is. So if you got rid of those 2 parking spaces, would you not still need a 12-foot variance, Mr. Roundtree?
I'm not sure, Matthew. You're saying if we took out the 9-foot, the first 9-footer? Is that what
I
we're
think we're
saying?
suggesting perhaps the two far end parking places, the one next to Hanson Court and then the one on the back. Is that what you had in mind?
Well,
Or 2 from the back?
it seems like you would still be left with
An additional parking space.
And one thing, Mr. Roundtree, that I'm concerned about also, I see that you are exceeding the amount of parking spaces for the on-site for the office use, but according to your calculations, you do not have any surplus parking when taking into account the use of the event center.
Right.
So would that put you under the minimum parking requirements?
Matthew, I'm not sure offhand. I'd have to evaluate that. But I think if you're asking about those 2 in parking spaces, if we could remove those in order to take pressure off that property line, Mr. Gravy's willing to do that for sure. As far as adding parking in other locations, that's a question mark we'd have to research.
Well, and I asked that because I would want to be certain that there was surplus parking to give before we started removing parking spaces from the
Yeah, it'd be our
plan.
preference not to. It's a concession Mr. Gravy's more than willing to make if we need to, but our preference is to keep it as it stands and provide enough buffering landscape-wise there that would prohibit the logical movement from property line to property line.
I would like some definitive answer to that question before we consider it or discuss. I mean, I don't know what the will of the board is, but that's obviously an important piece of this puzzle here as to whether we can trim parking or not.
And that's really related, Matthew, what you're saying in relationship to the event parking in terms of the evening parking uses?
Well, I mean, according to the calculations that have been provided on your plan, states that 107 spaces are required for the event center use, but I would like to check this formula that was used with the formula in our zoning ordinance.
So that actually would make you 1 space short now. You've got 106, and that requires 107. I didn't notice that.
Does that 107 include handicap parking?
No.
Because if I'm reading this correctly, it looks like they've got 120 spaces, 106 regular and 4 handicap. If that,
110.
and
Right,
that would
the-
be 100.
The parking requirements are exclusive of
Handicap.
handicap spaces.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Scott, do you have anything you want to add about the event center in terms of how it would be functioning?
Just the evening of Lincoln.
Okay.
Well, would it be better to maybe defer this and have you all take a little harder look at given Mr. Bruce's concerns, where we can trim parking, or if we can trim parking, and then maybe consider this at a later date.
Is that the recommendation?
No, I'm asking you, what do you think?
How does that work with you, Scott? That'd be problematic. I would love to. I mean, I know the reason we're in this situation is just because of the parking requirement, and obviously because of the strange geometry of the site. And I don't think we're going to be able to eke out much more parking, no matter if we had another discussion about it. It'd be a matter of whether we can, seek a variance for not having the parking requirement that the city would want, or would it be best? There's not a lot of room to move, is what we've really discovered. Hence all the situation we're in currently.
Yeah, man, I love this project. This is the kind of thing that I think variances are particularly intended to address. But we could approve this and still find out you don't have enough parking, even if we approved it as is.
Did you mention also some sort of a joint agreement, or could you address that, Scott, possibly? Mm-hmm.
I did not.
Okay.
But we are willing to work with them on parking.
Hey, Scott, if you'd come up so we can catch all the comments in the microphone.
Yeah, we are willing to work with our neighbors as far as joint parking. We had expressed that, but I don't think it made it to them. So we want to be good neighbors, and we don't intend to cramp them at all. So we'll work with them any way we can. And I do think it improves their property values from what that's worth.
And Chairman Rogers, I did want to point out that this has been to the Planning Commission, and I feel certain that the Planning Commission would not have approved something that did not meet the parking requirements. So I feel certain that the site meets the parking requirements, and regardless of what the plan says, that there are 107 spaces required and 106 provided. So I feel certain that it meets the parking requirements, and that may be incorrect. But with that being said, I don't know if there is any surplus or if it's just right on the dot of the parking requirements. So in my mind, I feel comfortable that the Planning Commission has reviewed it and said that it meets the parking requirements. But whether there is any surplus parking, whether there's the 2 spaces or no spaces that could be removed, I don't have an answer to that question.
So if we approve this, subject to the deletion of one of these parking spaces to move that variance off of Mr. Bruce's property, then if down the road if we find out it doesn't meet parking requirements, that's something else. That's beyond us. I mean, they're going to have to deal with the city and.
No, he could make another request for a parking variance.
Yeah.
So he in that event he could be back before the board.
And that would we couldn't deal with that today, could we? Couldn't just pick up a parking variance here. We'd have to be advertised. And all
That's
that.
correct. Yeah, I'd have to follow the same advertisement protocol.
Okay.
And
Chairman, I'd like a couple observations. I think Mr. Bruce's complaint is not that we're somehow damaging his property. His complaint is that the city has refused to sell him this piece, and he did apply at the time. This is Gateway property, and it went through the process of the Gateway Commission. There were actually 3 proposals for the property, and the Gateway Commission selected Mr. Gravy's proposal. Unfortunately for Mr. Bruce, he's had parking problems since the day he opened those buildings out there that he's got, and I guess he's wanted the city to solve his problems by selling him some more property, and the city is not elected to do that, and I don't know that the city would ever be required to do that. I think staff feels very strongly that this is a good proposal. It's a great use for this property. It's going to make a very nice gateway entrance to the Gateway area and on the medical center and all that. And I would the fact that it becomes 3 feet or 4 feet from the property line is not claimed to do damage to Mr. Bruce's property. He doesn't like it, and we're not dealing with someone's residence. We're dealing with a commercial office building, and it's not that unusual to have relatively close commercial office buildings. In terms of satisfying the gateway standards, almost all the gateway standards provide that they can be adjusted with variances. It's not unusual at all for projects in the gateway to have come to this board seeking a variance of some kind or another. And one of the common ones is the amount of landscape area between the parking area, sidewalk, and the building, because the standards out there call for a pretty wide strip, and it's not at all uncommon that needs to be adjusted. And of course, if you have a drive-in window or one of the tire stores that has drive-through doors, you can't landscape between that driveway and the building. So, I think staff is supportive of these being granted as requested, and that allow this project to proceed.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you said. I do think, though, what was omitted is Mr. Bruce does have an expectation that the ordinances would be adhered to on both sides, and this is going to move this parking lot within 3 feet of his property line, which is 12 feet off of what he otherwise could expect by ordinance. But I think it sounds like we have an opportunity by trimming one parking space. It's not going to be a problem for the property because they're two over what they need to. I don't think it's mission critical to Mr. Gravy's project to have this one parking space. I don't think that's going to derail anything.
Thinking out of the box, I'm wondering, since our shortage is probably going to be in the evenings when we have the venue as opposed to the daytime hours, perhaps we can kind of extend an olive branch by designating those N2 spaces maybe to the owners of those businesses just to free up parking on their parking site. And then in the evenings, we would have those 2 spaces for our use.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, at that point, it's a win-win. You designated parking for the tenants in the buildings next door, and then you've also got the needed space if you do have an event that needs that number of parking spaces.
Right. And that gives them 2 spaces they wouldn't otherwise have.
Right. I would rather, just as a comment on this board, I would rather us allow him to keep the spaces as long as Mr. Gravy is in agreement to allow them to utilize at least 2 of those spaces versus minimizing the number. Granted, it has impact to Mr. Bruce's property, but if he's able to utilize those spaces, I think it wins for both parties.
I'm concerned that's not something that the city really has any business to do. That's really a contract between 2 private individuals, and not something that would be difficult for us to use as a
right.
This
is probably not the right venue for that, I'm guessing.
I don't know, but that just concerns me that if we were to make that a condition to your property, that'd be a very odd condition, an unusual one that I
understand that.
Mr. Render, can you come here for just a second? Let me show you what I'm talking about. Yeah. Let me show you.
That's what we throw. That's
what you're talking about, right?
It's just taking out that space potentially and maybe reducing the depth of the hammerhead there. And then what we were saying is potentially these had to go down to 8.5 and be compact spaces. That's a possibility as well.
I think you're completely out of that variance if you do that. I think that variance goes away. could just do that right there. Just eliminate that spot.
Yeah, that's exactly what I draw on my sheet as a possibility.
Okay. Any problem with that?
No, just like we said, it's a space that we don't have, and that's not fine.
Which variance was that?
The first one.
4 and 10.
Chairman Rogers, there was one thing that I neglected to mention. We did receive some correspondence from neighboring property owner Guy Dotson, and I put that in front of you. He said that he would not be attending. It was handwritten on a copy of the legal notice. And he owns the property at 902 Dashiell. I believe that's the carpet remnant store next door. And I also did not show the photographs. I don't know if it would help, but I'd be happy to show these really quickly to you. As I mentioned, this is the existing building that Mr. Gravy is renovating, the parking lot, which he is also redoing. This is the back of the existing building. And one of the things that I pointed out in the staff comments was that there is an existing mature tree line along that western property line. They're on the adjacent property, and this is where he's requesting the landscape variance on the Dashiell Street part of the property behind the existing building. So there are existing trees across the property line, and this is that property to the west at 912 Dashiell Street. This is looking south at the subject property from Hanson Court. You see that tree line is approximately where the city property, former city property, abuts the Dashiell Street property. And this is looking south at the subject property from Hanson Court, the existing building. You see where the arrow is pointed is where the proposed building addition would be constructed. And this is the eastern portion of the Hanson Court property, looking back towards West College. And the western portion of the property, and you'll see Mr. Bruce's building behind that tree. The intersection of Hanson Court and Medical Center Parkway. Looking north from Hanson Court towards Medical Center Parkway. Looking west along Hanson Court with Medical Center Parkway in the background. And the adjacent properties to the west along Hanson Court. I believe Mr. Bruce owns all three of those properties.
All right. All right, any other questions for either Mr. Gravy or Mr. Roundtree? All right, thanks, gentlemen. Thank you. And we've already conducted a public hearing, I believe. And we need to close it? Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against this application? All right, seeing no one, declare a public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussions or motions. I guess we've got 5 different parts of this application that we need to consider in separate motions. Correct.
If there's not any further discussion with respects to the 10-foot variance, requested 10-foot variance from the 15 wide foot front landscape yard, I would make a motion that we approve.
I'll second.
All right, motion in the second.
There's one.
Yeah.
Subject to staff comments. Thank you.
All right, motion in the second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, next we'll consider the 6-foot variance from the minimum 8-foot wide side planting yard. Now, Matthew, on our diagram, our plat here, it's variance number 2 and variance number 4. Does that correspond with the bullets here?
Yes, the variance number 2 would correspond with this particular variance request, and you can see that it's in those pinch points in that northwest appendage as well as along the back side of the proposed building addition.
Okay. All right. I guess this is the one that I would ask the board to consider making an approval of this one conditioned on the elimination of the one parking space in the northwest corner.
I think that one may be more appropriate with the variance number 4.
Okay. All right.
So we're going to accomplish number 2 as is and not deal with that spot yet. Okay.
Because they'll still need the full 6-foot variance along the back side of the building, which I believe the board has not expressed any displeasure in.
If there's no other discussion, I'll make a motion to approve component number 2, the 6-foot variance, subject to staff comments.
All right, motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the 3-foot variance from the minimum 5-foot wide landscape strip.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve that
Second.
with the
Oh, sorry.
conditions set by the staff.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the 12-foot variance, this is number 4, which requires minimum 15 feet between parking and/or access drives.
We're assured that we're going to have the number of spots if we eliminate one, or we need to make provisions for that if
I can't say that for certain. If the board does wish to eliminate a spot, I'd like to see if Mr. Roundtree could possibly work up what the distance would be if that spot is eliminated so that we can know if that's the board's wish to move forward with eliminating that spot, we'll know the distance there is so we can adjust the variance request accordingly.
You want him to do it like right now?
If he can, if he has a scale on him and can.
We're finding out what the distance is.
Yes.
By the parking space.
Well, I say that, but in looking at the exhibit, if you look not adjacent to Mr. Bruce's property, but adjacent to kind of
The street, I guess.
not the street, but if you follow that property down along, adjacent to the property to the west, there is one pinch point that doesn't abut Mr. Bruce's property that still is just 3 feet. So they would still need the full 12-foot variance, even if you were to condition it upon that space being eliminated.
Right.
So
it doesn't matter. He doesn't need to do that calculation.
right, he can put his scale up.
No, sir.
But would the condition of, well, no one's made an motion yet, so I'll be quiet.
will that condition apply to that top corner then or not? We're saying it's just going to apply to this pinch point down along the property line and not that hammerhead section.
I think it would be, if you decided to condition the approval upon the elimination of that space, it would essentially be whatever the distance, the resulting distance was, would be what would be granted for that area. It was advertised at a 12-foot variance, and that 12-foot variance would still be required because there is an area that doesn't touch Mr. Bruce's property, or that isn't adjacent to Mr. Bruce's property, where they still need that 12-foot variance. And I know this plan is a lot to take in. I'd be happy to come over there and show that area to you if you'd like.
Yes, I see where you're talking about. It's
I think that if you eliminate that one parking space, you eliminate the need for a variance at that point.
right.
Yeah, but what he's saying is, you still got to have a,
Right for right here.
no, right here.
And over here.
No, down below.
But in Chairman Rogers, the
okay.
dotted line along
I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Bruce's
you're right.
property is showing the 8-foot planting yard. It's not showing the 15-foot. So even if it gets it out of that 8-foot planting yard, it may still be in that 15-foot separation area.
Sorry, I thought that was a setback line. Okay. Gotcha.
There are a lot of moving parts with this particular plan.
Yeah, okay.
Do we wait on the motion?
I think so.
I mean, I'm okay with, I'm just thinking of the mechanics of pulling this fine. We're still allowing the 12 feet, and are we creating a parking difficulty or not? We need to allow for that? We're going to say you can be less than, I guess you advertise for a 12. If it's less than that, that's okay. So if he doesn't need that much up there at those corners, it still covers that section, correct?
I think it's one of those deals, if he creates a parking difficulty, then he comes back and asks for a parking variance.
Okay.
He could either do that, or he could, adjust the building size to
Just something else, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But it may be that he does have that space to give. We just don't know at this point. We know if it were purely office, he would have 2 surplus spaces based on the calculations, but with the calculations for the auditorium, that's something that I would need to look into a little bit more.
If we approve the variance or the bullet point as it's written, we're going to assure ourselves, our understanding is that one spot's going away. Or they're going to come back and we'll have to address
I think
it.
that would have to be part of our motion.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
With the okay.
I nodded prematurely.
That's all right. Give it a stab. I'll make a motion that we approve the 12-foot variance with the condition that we're eliminating a parking place in that northwest appendage, as Matthew calls it, subject to staff comments.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Before we vote, I just would like to make a comment on behalf of both parties that are involved in this, is I hope that if this gets approved today, that you can work out somewhat of a gentleman's agreement, irrespective of the legality piece of it, that there is made available use to the adjacent property owners and/or tenants. And I know that has no bearing on, as Ms. King pointed out, but just wanted to say that.
Good point. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and finally, the 3-foot variance from the minimum 10-foot building, between buildings, indoor parking.
I'll make a motion that we approve, subject to any staff comments.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that's been approved as well. Mr. Gravy, Mr. Roundtree, that application has been approved in its entirety, subject to the elimination, I understand, of one of the parking spots. So appreciate y'all's patience and look forward to seeing the project keep going up here. All right, now we'll move on to some special use permit requests. Application Z14059 by Ms. Brandy Herman. She's requesting a special use permit in order to conduct a home occupation, a hair salon at her residence at 1112 Peachtree Street, which is located in a residential single-family RS10 zone. Mr. Obama.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. The subject property is located at the northeast corner of Peachtree Street and Lucille Lane. It is located in the Minglewood subdivision, which was built in the late 90s in the Mitchell-Nielsen area. And Minglewood is just to the west of Hamilton Drive and just to the east of Battleground Drive. You'll see on the aerial photo in front of you, it is the property in question, 1112 Peachtree Street, is the area labeled with site and the arrow. property is developed with a single-family home. The applicants came in to the planning department back in April and discussed with us the procedure for going to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a home-based hair salon. They decided not to make application at that time, but they did obtain a building permit in April, I believe it was April, in order to convert the garage into the salon area. Staff approved the building permit with the condition that it could not be used as a salon until the Board of Zoning Appeals issued a special use permit for the use of the property as such. As I mentioned, the applicant wishes to use the property for a home-based hair salon, and because there will be customer traffic coming to and from it, any type of home-based business that has customer traffic requires a special use permit from the Board of Zoning Appeals, as opposed to a home-based business that we can approve administratively over the counter at the planning department. The certificate of occupancy was issued for the garage conversion, and what they've done is a portion of that garage was converted into the salon area, and a portion of it was converted into a full bathroom. The salon area is 15 by 20, and it's the front portion of the garage, about the front 2/3 of the garage. And the house, as you can see by the aerial photo, the garage and the driveway face Lucille Lane as opposed to Peachtree Street. As I mentioned, it is a corner lot. The salon area is about 300 square feet. The applicant incorrectly indicated that it was 250 square feet. With respect to the operation of the salon, clients will visit by appointment only, according to the information provided by the applicant. Days and hours of operation will be Tuesday through Friday from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m., with the last client leaving no later than 6 p.m., and on Saturdays from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m., and the applicant has indicated that the maximum number of appointments that she will schedule per business day will be 6, and that she will leave 15 to 30-minute gaps in between appointments in order to eliminate overlap of appointments. She stated that she will have no outside employees. It will be just her operating the salon. With respect to the square footage, the zoning ordinance dictates that not more than 25% of the square footage of the home can be used in the conduct of the home occupation. With the square footage of the home, including the converted garage, is 1,848 square feet, using the numbers provided on the property assessor's website. And the 300 square foot salon will take up approximately 17% of the structure, which does not exceed the maximum square footage. Access into the salon from the outside will be provided via a door facing the driveway. The door was installed during the garage conversion. As I mentioned, the driveway comes in off of Lucille Lane. The driveway, as I've measured it, is approximately 22 feet wide and 40 feet deep, which is room enough for 4 vehicles. The applicants have indicated that they have 2 vehicles in their household, so it will leave 2 vehicles for the visitors to the salon to park, which, according to the applicant, she will have no more than 1 client at a time. So they're using that logic, there should be sufficient parking on site without her clients having to park on the street. The zoning ordinance does allow a maximum 3 square foot attached sign. The applicant has indicated that it is her preference not to have a sign, but the State Barber Board does require one, and I emailed the Barber Board last week to confirm that a sign is required, and they did email me back and said that a sign is indeed required. So the applicant would also like to request approval for a sign. The sign would have to be attached to the house and could not exceed 3 square feet. And she is wanting to put up the smallest size sign that the state will allow her to put up and still meet state licensing requirements. If the board approves this request, staff recommends the following conditions. All client visits are to be by appointment only. There shall be no overlapping appointments, and there shall be a maximum of 6 appointments per business day. Hours of operation shall not exceed the hours of operation contained in the application, and all appointments shall end no later than 6 p.m. Number 3, any signage approved for this home-based business by the Board of Zoning Appeals shall also conform to the city sign ordinance. And I'll show you some photographs of the subject property. First of all, here's a little bit more detailed aerial photograph with dimensions penciled in. And the 40-foot depth of the driveway is from the back of curb to the to where there are some planters in front of the new salon. There's a copy of the permit. I included that in your agenda materials, stating that the remodeling was okay, but use as a hair salon cannot commence until the BZA approves the special use permit. Here's the front of the house along Peachtree. This is the entrance to the proposed salon. The garage doors used to be along this wall. This is the driveway at the subject property. And this is looking at the driveway from Peachtree Street. This is the adjacent property to the north. Looking across Lucille Lane from the subject property. This is looking across Peachtree Street, as is this. And this is inside the proposed salon. And I thought I did have a picture of the property next door, but it looks like I have accidentally omitted that one. This is inside the proposed salon. I did want to point out some things that Mr. Herman submitted after the agendas went out. He did submit a, and these are all in front of you. There is a report from the property assessor's office. The first sheet, the very bottom, shows the valuation before the garage conversion, which was $128,033, and the valuation from the property assessor's office after the garage conversion, which is $144,387. He submitted a letter from his neighbor across Lucille Lane. That is the property that the driveway directly across Lucille Lane. Mr. Billy Haggerty at 1202 Peachtree Street. And he submitted a petition in support of his application, 3 pages long, and that's in front of you as well. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and Mr. and Mrs. Herman are both present if you have any questions for them also.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Any questions for Mr. Bowman? All right, Mr. and Ms. Herman, anything you all would like to add to the application?
How y'all doing? Our intention isn't to hurt the neighborhood. I mean, I know there are people here that are here to object. I got almost 60 signatures of neighbors, that, we wave to every day that, said that, we've made that area a lot more beautiful with the landscape that we've done, and the conversion. We try to go out of our way to make it look like it wasn't a garage there before, we wanted it to look good. And I'm out of work. I drove a school bus, had to quit my job. Our son got diagnosed with leukemia back in last October, and we lost him in May. And Brandy, of course, does hair, and she was working at a place before, and we couldn't afford the monthly rent that it costs for them to rent a booth. And the conversion, I did all the work myself. And like I said,
we have a 10-month-old, and I just want to be close to him. I don't want to miss a minute of his life. And this is just a way for me to continue to work and be with my son. And that's all I'm asking. I just want to live again.
The people that are here to object live in that cul-de-sac that kind of goes around, and there is an outlet there. But if we have to, I'll tell her clients not to drive that way. You know, if it bothers an extra car going by their house every now and then, we'll just tell them not to drive that way. Or
And
try
they
not.
won't mind. My clients
Yeah.
won't mind to just come the way they came.
Yeah, I mean, we'll just, not to drive through that part of the neighborhood,
All right. Any questions from Mr. and Ms. Herman? All right. Thank you all. At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would please come forward. State your name and address for us, please.
Okay. Preston Larry Wilkerson. We reside at 1738 Lucille Lane. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Our property is 3 houses from the subject property located on that corner. We've had 3 residences in Murfreesboro since moving here in 1969. I'm a retired real estate appraiser. When we retired, we chose to downsize and stay in the city, and there are many reasons why we decided to stay. We have a very well-run city, excellent services, well-planned, and zoning for the protection and benefits of our citizens. We're very careful to select this particular subdivision to build our house because it was located of the location to all of the services, safety, protection, and was approved as RS10 residential in place. We all know that once the integrity of a subdivision or neighborhood is compromised, it's very difficult to deny any other requests that are made, and thus the downward spiral begins. Our primary concern is for the safety, benefit, and welfare of our children and citizens. As it's pointed out, there are over 50 residential properties within this subdivision, but there are 2 inlet outlets, one being at Peachtree and Lucille, the other at Clifford and Battleground Drive. The section of the street at Peachtree and Lucille Lane is an older street in the subdivision. It's approximately 18 feet wide, and they have no gutters or curvings. Some of the sections on Peachtree are an additional 7.5 feet wider. Thus, you can see any increased traffic volume. Street parking can create problems. Please look at this very carefully. I don't want to speculate on what might occur, but I want to share with you what has already occurred. I'm not opposed to yard sales, although they can create unusual traffic and parking situations. When yard sales occur multiple times a year at a residence, it seems to be approaching a conducting of a type of business. On one occasion, there was, I estimated, 15 to 18 vehicles in a driveway, yard, and parked on Peachtree and Lucille Lane. I cannot say for sure what this particular situation was, but I was told that it was a business, some type of business demonstration. I do know this, it was very difficult to navigate through all of the area. Until this request for zoning sign change was put in the yard, it was not uncommon for us to see 1 to 8 vehicles in the yard, driveway, or street. There have been some cases that trucks parked in the driveway extended into the street past the gutters on Lucille Lane. Again, I don't know what's taking place. I was told that they were selling used cars there. I'm in favor of people starting their businesses. It's one of the great opportunities we have in this country. I did this very thing, and I conducted my business in a properly zoned commercial office on Memorial Drive for over 20 years. Our concern is, with all that has already taken place, what will take place when a special use permit is issued. This being said, the concerns that we have for the safety of the children in the area, they walk to and from the bus stop on Hamilton and Peachtree. It's not uncommon to see children playing in or near the streets in that area. Families walking with their children and their pets, it can become a very dangerous situation. We have had 2 medical emergencies on Lucille Lane within 3 houses of ours. The first responders and ambulances were involved. The first responders most likely came from the Jones Boulevard station. The most direct route would be coming down Jones onto Peachtree and then into Lucille Lane. if they could not pass, had an accident, or got delayed, it could be a life-threatening situation. As a retired real estate appraiser, I know that property values could be impacted. On the standard appraisal form for a neighborhood section that requires 16 items to be described, for example, characteristics, trends, percent of use, single family, commercial, etc. All of these indicate the importance of the neighborhood in the section that would cause us to select our comparable sales for determining the value of the property. How much will it be affected? I have no idea. It would be determined when you sell the property, and how many other special use permits were issued, what the market conditions were at that time, but it will affect value. We purchased in this neighborhood because it was a single-family residential that was approved by our planning commission and in place. Please don't approve this request and sacrifice the safety, rights, and benefits of many of us for the benefit of one. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you for your service to our community.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkerson. Mr. Herman, we'll tell you what we'll do is at the conclusion of the public hearing, then we'll allow you to address any of those concerns, okay?
I do have a question for
Sure. Mr. Wilkerson, if you want to come back up, I think there's a question.
You made a statement about previous garage sales. Are you saying that the applicants have had multiple garage sales?
There have been multiple garage sales up from the applicant on that property, yes.
And that they were the ones that were parking 8 cars in the street?
What I was saying was that people at the garage sales would come up, park in the streets, on the streets, be it on Peachtree and or on Lucille Lane, because the garage sales were set up in the driveway.
And then you made a statement about another additional time about parking on the street?
Yes, there was one additional situation that occurred. I don't recall the exact date, but whether it was a weekday or a weekend, but there was I was told some type of business demonstration that was being held at the subject property. I don't know what it was. I don't know anything about that, except I do know that they were parked on both sides of the street on Peachtree as well as Lucille Lane, and it was very difficult to get in and out. If there were a medical emergency during a sign like that, who knows how the first responders could get through there.
Okay, I think that gave me clarification. I couldn't tell in your previous statement whether you meant that was there was another location that was hosting garage sales and other events.
No. Just I'm speaking of that
This
particular one that had
house.
multiple garage sales over the year.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against the application?
Yes, I would. My name is Karen Lauder. I live at 1730 Lucille Lane.
Can you spell your last name for us?
Lawter.
Thank you.
Okay, I am the house that is next door to this property, and I am concerned, like the gentleman before, about increased traffic. If you go into this neighborhood, it's a nice residential, with little narrow streets, and I am very concerned about, one, what the traffic's going to be like. I know that you can't always keep appointments. They may run longer, and you've got people running into each other. I'm also concerned what this is going to do to my value of my property. I own my home. I want to stay there, but if I go to sell it and all of a sudden I need that money just because I'm selling it, I'm going to be faced with reduced property value. I don't know what it's going to do, but I don't like it. I got to tell you that much. Thank you for listening.
All right, thank you, Ms. Lauder. Anyone else?
Good afternoon. My name is Nicole Cutler. I live at 1746 Lucille Lane. I am 4 houses down from the beauty shop. What upset me is the fact that they had their grand opening before the zoning signs were even put in their yard. I had the impression that the zoning signs should be up prior to even building the beauty shop. I'm not sure. But we do not want a beauty shop in our neighborhood. The parking is horrendous. On the side of their driveway, on Lucille Lane, going to Peach Street, is not even 25 feet that I haven't measured her, but you can look at it. There have been many times coming from Peach Street, turning into Lucille Lane, that there has always been a vehicle parked there. It's hard to get around because our road doesn't curve smoothly. It just comes straight to a T. And when you come around the corner, it's hard to get around because there have been a vehicle parked there for a long time. I did ask one time when somebody was out if they could please move the vehicle, which they did, and I appreciated that. But the parking down that street is really hard because we do have a narrow street. And I don't like the fact that if I decide to sell my home, I probably could not get the appraised value on it because there's a beauty shop 4 houses down from me. And that bothers me. Also, the fact we do have children that do play on that street. And I'm afraid with extra cars coming and going, it could cause a problem because of the kids. So that's why I don't really think it should be approved. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cutler.
My name's Andrea Williams. I live at 1742 Lucille Lane, and I don't have much more to offer other than what was previously stated. I just want to go on record that I'm not in favor of this for the same reasons that have been previously stated. And just personally, I want to let you guys know, I've never met you before, but I have heard your story, and I'm very sympathetic to you wanting to work from home. I do work from home as well, and this has nothing to do with personally your experiences. It's just property values and maintaining the integrity of our residential neighborhood.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Williams.
Good morning. My name is Gary Miser. I live at 1758 Lucille Lane. I love my home, and I love anybody that wants to take care of their home, and I love anybody that wants to try to make ends meet. I'm self-employed. I work in my home. I never have any vehicles parked outside my home that would distract anybody's driving through. My main concern more than anything on this street is the people that speed. We have children that live across the street. I always see a young boy riding his bicycle. And I can tell you, I wished I could have videotaped the people that drive down Lucille Lane. I have no objection for these people to work in their home. I've known them for about 1.5 years now. They're good people. I can understand the people's plight for wanting to not have a business in that area. But I know of several homes that have cars parked on Lucille Lane. Why isn't anybody complaining about that? In fact, there was a gentleman down the street that died recently. He would have parties up into the 2 in the morning with 12 to 15 cars on that street, and nobody complained. Why? Why isn't there anything being done about the speeding in that area? I'm concerned more than anything. I don't care if people want to live in their home and work from their home. That should be their privilege. We live in a country that is God-given rights. I'm a military veteran. I fought for this country. And if anybody wants to try to make something good for themselves, I applaud them. We shouldn't have to have laws. I can understand the parking, but why should there be laws to keep people from trying to make a dollar, especially in the economy we live in right now? I invite you to come by my home sometime. I'm proud of it. I take care of it. I think it's one of the most beautiful homes on that block. So I hope you consider this and let your conscience be your guide.
Thank you, Mr. Miser.
My name is Ray Gilley, and I purchased this home at 1206, right behind Billy, about 2 years ago. And John and Brandy's got one of the sharpest landscaping, neat homes on Peachtree. And I live on a narrow street. Those apartments on down the road, I forget, they took up a lot of the street, and it's very narrow, but I'm for them. I hope that y'all will pass this. Billy wrote a 3-page letter, I believe you said, for him. And I live right beside Billy. And I wish my home looked as good as John and Brandy's. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilley. All right. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against the application? Then at this time, I declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion or motion.
I think Mr. Herman wanted to speak again.
Sorry. Yeah, Mr. Herman, if you want to, you're welcome to come back up here. And while there's a tendency to want to get back into a back and forth, we don't have time to do that today.
I understand. All I want to say is that, everybody was talking about the kids, and I just want to say how much I love the children in our neighborhood. And what y'all don't see is how many times I step out in the middle of the road to stop somebody that's speeding. Y'all don't see that because y'all live in a cul-de-sac, and I try to keep speeding down. I've stopped people at that stop sign all the time and tell them to slow down in my neighborhood, because it is my neighborhood. I've lived there since 1980. I've lived in that neighborhood. I was born on Chamberlain. I got a lot of pride in my neighborhood. That's all I want to say. I love that area. It's a good area. I'm proud of it. So
I think the board may be interested in the concerns that were expressed earlier about
the garage sales.
About garage sales.
I don't have a garage anymore, and I have had a garage sale in the past, but the garage is gone. But I was not a habitual garage seller.
All right. I think there was some sort of a business.
No, sir. No, there wasn't. After we got the salon done, some of her friends came by, and they did take a look at it, and Brandy had some muffins and gave them some muffins and stuff. But no, there was no business demonstration there.
Do you ever sell used cars from the property?
Now, I've had a car over the time. I have sold my cars there, but like I said, I've nothing. No.
Any other questions for Mr. Herman? All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right. The public hearing having been closed, then I guess we're ready to consider the application.
I'll at least start the discussion. I think this is one of the more difficult applications that we have had when it comes to a beauty salon or a hair salon. I will say that we have routinely approved these type of variances or special use permits in the past based upon, I would say, the lack of opposition with respects to the neighbors in the neighborhood, because we don't want there to be a negative impact on the neighborhood with respects to any type of business that would be conducted in the neighborhood, or at least I'll speak for myself when I say that. Before I heard, I just want to say this, before I heard the public comments, I was going to make the statement that this is probably the longest laundry list of folks that I've seen that would have approved anything in reference to a business in their neighborhood. However, there are several neighbors here that have specific concerns with respects to the operation of the hair salon itself. I don't know at what point in time you look at people with respects to that are for and people that are against. I don't know if that needs to weigh with respects to our decision. I do feel that that I would never want to vote for anything that would have a negative impact in any neighborhood, whether it was my neighborhood or y'all's neighborhood. I think that's a matter of opinion as to whether it would be or wouldn't be. I don't think only time will tell. I do think that of other hair salons that we have approved in other neighborhoods, I have not had any negative feedback with respects to those proprietors having those businesses in those neighborhoods. That's not to say that we would necessarily have any feedback either as a board or as a citizen of this city of Murfreesboro. I'm honestly on the fence with this because of number one, the routine that we do in granting these, but at the same time we don't usually have opposition with respects to the neighbors in the neighborhood. So I'd love to hear any comments that any of the rest of the board might have.
Well, I think they've made a good decision to have, one customer at a time, and they do have 2 extra spaces that a person could park, and by the hours, the last appointment being done by 6 o'clock would be good. And personally, and to have 60 people that agree is outstanding, I think.
I agree. It's a difficult one, and to say you're for it, it makes you, I guess, have the appearance that you're disregarding what some of the neighbors say, and I don't want to. That's a difficult position to take or to just assume. But of these type of business that we've seen, we got a really reasonable set of operating, parameters as far as time of operation, where they're going to put cars, how many at a time. There's not other employees, and this is as little impact as I remember the other ones that we've seen. Only 4 days a week. So like Ken said, it's a tough one, but it's as low impact as these compares to the other ones we've seen.
In addition, when we set these conditions, if we do approve this application, those conditions go into effect and limit the number of vehicles and limit the number of customers, which is enforceable. Our planning staff sometimes goes by places which have received special permits to make sure they're in compliance with these rules that we set for them, so that the community continues to operate with as little impact as possible. I think the space provided would allow for a little bit of overlap with the 2 parking spaces given, but furthermore, I think that the enforceability of this special permit puts the onus on the business owner to make sure that they keep everything tidy and under the appropriate rules.
Hey, Matthew, do you know of any other home occupations that we've approved in this area in the last several years? I can't think of anything.
There was a home-based daycare that was approved on Shelley Street, just to the south of the subject property, back around 2008, I want to say. I don't believe it's in operation there anymore. That's one that I can think of right off the top of my head. Of course, family and group daycare homes are subject to a different set of criteria, but they're home-based nonetheless.
Are there any administratively approved home occupations in this area?
Well, I feel certain that there are. We have each year we have a stack of home occupations this thick that are approved. I mean, we probably approve. Probably, Ms. Davis, what would you say? 2 or 3 home-based businesses a day? Yeah.
Okay.
Administratively, that is.
Okay. And the reason this was not susceptible to administrative approval and had to come to the BZA is why?
It is because of the traffic that's associated with it. The home-based businesses, the traffic and the signage, I should say, the home-based businesses that we can approve administratively, many of them you wouldn't even know were there. And that's, one of the reasons why, if we drive through our own neighborhoods, there are probably, depending on the size of the neighborhood, perhaps even several dozen home-based businesses in a large neighborhood that we don't even know are there because the administrative home-based business guidelines are there to make sure that they're inconspicuous. Now, if there is something that goes above and beyond what we can approve administratively, such as there being traffic to and from the residence or any type of signage, then that does require the special use permit. Those are 2 of the things that kick in that requirement.
Okay. In the recommendations from the staff, I noticed that you, I guess, made recommendations that kind of complied with what the application was as far as the hours of operation and the number of, or the last appointment and that sort of thing. The applicant has represented that she won't have any outside employees, but that wasn't part of the recommendations. Is there any reason, or is it just?
Yes, it's because that is strictly limited in our zoning ordinance. Even if
it goes without saying.
It goes without saying. That's
okay.
Correct.
What about no on-street parking? Would that be appropriate to include if the application was approved?
I think that probably would be an appropriate condition, although it would be a little bit hard to enforce because then we get into a situation where if there are vehicles, well, are they vehicles that are parking there because they're customers, or are they friends that are coming to visit who may park on the street just out of habit when they come to visit? Mm-hmm. So I think that is an appropriate condition, but it may be a little bit hard to enforce. Would you agree with that, Mr. Ives?
I would, yes, it would, and I think unless they're marked by the city engineer, by city staff as no parking, then it is legal to park on all city streets, subject to fire hydrants and things like that. And I understand the problem. I live in an area that has quite narrow streets, and on-street parking is a problem. And we have covenants that prohibit it, but we find it's virtually impossible to enforce that even when there's covenants. So I wouldn't recommend that because of the problem with enforcement.
And I look at the driveway, and just from the pictures here, there are 2 vehicles parked in the driveway now. I'm not sure you could get another vehicle in there.
I was able to park my Malibu.
Now, the Malibu's on the street.
In that particular picture.
Did you move it?
on a different day. I believe I parked behind one of those vehicles on a different day. I made several trips out there.
I guess you could get another vehicle in there stacked, but nobody could leave. It was in the front row there.
Well, and they're not pulled up all the way to the front of their driveway either.
Okay.
I'm fairly certain that when I came by, I parked in the driveway, but
different Malibu.
Well, I made several trips out there, and I'm not 100% certain.
And I think also in applications like this, if granted, we've always included a provision that it laps on termination, or excuse me, on sale of the property. Okay. Well, I think I followed one of the other board members expressed, Davis, probably, that we've got to look at the rule that we go by is whether the proposed building or use will not have a substantial or undue adverse effect upon adjacent property. And what I'm looking at are the terms substantial or undue. I understand that it may increase traffic a bit in the neighborhood with some of these people coming and going, and that could be an adverse effect. But I think it's been said earlier that the proposed use here is one of the lightest home salons that we've seen as far as limiting the hours of operation, one client at a time, no employees. And so I think that I would struggle to find that there would be a substantial or undue adverse effect on the adjacent property in this situation.
Chairman Rogers, one thing that I did want to point out is that I have counseled the applicants to make sure that they do pull as close to the garage as possible so that there is ample room behind those vehicles.
All right.
And we're assuming there is a sign that's going to be at the minimum or below?
Yes.
Size-wise?
What they have indicated to me is that they will, whatever the minimum sign is that the state will require in order to meet their minimum licensure requirements is what they will post, and that can only be attached to the house. It can't be a freestanding sign. I've seen one of the home-based salons that was approved, but I think in early 2014, I think what they did was they actually put like some type of adhesive sign to the glass part of their door, and so it wasn't even a separate sign. It was just adhered, some kind of film that adhered to the door.
Anyone
I'll
ready
take the
to
staff. If there's no other discussion, again, difficult one, but I'm okay with this one, and we'll see which direction it goes. I'll make a motion to approve the special use permit, subject to staff comments, and with the additional that the permit lapse on sale of the property.
A second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Mr. Herman, that application has been approved, subject to those staff comments that were talked about, the hours of operation, also the special use permit will lapse upon your sale of the property. And it's always difficult for us as a board to step in to a situation where there's a disagreement among neighbors, but going forward, I do hope you all respect each other's positions on this issue and make it as accommodating for both sides as you possibly can. So, thank you all, everybody, for your patience and respect. All right. Next, we'll. All right. We're going to take just a brief break here, and we'll resume in, say, 5 minutes. All right, we'll reconvene the meeting here, and we'll continue on with special use permit application Z14060 by Mr. Mike Jones from North Boulevard Church of Christ Men's Ministries, requesting a special use permit in order to operate a Christmas tree sales location in a commercial highway zone at 1266 Northwest Broad Street. Mr. Blumley.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. This is the same location that we've seen before the Board of Zoning Appeals every year since, let's see, for the last 8 years. How many ever that subtracts out to be? I didn't major in math. At any rate, Mr. Jones, who just told me before the or during the intermission that he had an appointment away from City Hall, and he had to leave, and I told him that we would proceed without his presence. But this site has been approved for the last 8 years for Christmas tree sales. Mr. Jones would like to operate again from November 22nd of this year until December the 20th. And the application is identical to in years past. If the board approves this application, staff recommends the following conditions. The site must pass an electrical safety inspection prior to opening for business. An electrical permit must be purchased from the Building and Codes Department in order to obtain this inspection, and all temporary structures must meet the minimum building setback requirements for the CH zone. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them either before or after the public hearing.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blumley. Questions for Mr. Blumley? All right, this time we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application? And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion or motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the special use permit with the conditions set by the staff.
Second.
All right, motion is second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that application has been approved, and we'll now consider application Z14061 by Mr. Dan Ongst for Boy Scout Troop 197 of Fellowship United Methodist Church. He's requesting a special use permit in order to operate Christmas tree sales at a church in a residential single-family RS-15 zone, and this is for property located 2511 New Salem Highway, which I believe is the church.
That's correct. That is the Fellowship United Methodist Church. Mr. Ongst has made application for Christmas tree sales at this lot since 2008, which was the year that the zoning ordinance was amended in order to allow Christmas tree sales at institutional group assembly uses such as churches and schools. His application this year is identical to in years past. We'll note that in 2012, the City Council approved the amendment of the zoning ordinance to allow for there to be the waiver of a deposit if the host institutional group assembly use, or the church in this case, takes responsibility for the cleanup, and they have done so. So with that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions. To my knowledge, we have not received any complaints about this particular site, and staff recommends the same two conditions except substitute RS-15 for CH in the condition number 2. Mr. Ongst is in attendance, and he has been patiently waiting for his turn to speak.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blumley. Any questions for Mr. Blumley? All right, Mr. Ongst, now's your opportunity to filibuster here for another hour or so. No, you're going to waive it? All right. You'd say we didn't try. At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would come forward. Seeing no one, will declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion or motion.
If there's no discussion, I'll move to approve the application subject to staff comments.
I'll second.
Motion is second. Further discussion? Not all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, now we'll finish up here with application Z14062, again by Mr. Ongst for Boy Scout Troop 197 of Fellowship United Methodist Church, requesting to operate a Christmas tree sales location in a commercial highway zone at 1807 Memorial Boulevard. Mr. Blumley.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. Our last Christmas tree lot this afternoon in our last public hearing is at the Haynes Hardware business at 1807 Memorial Boulevard. This is the second year that the applicant has made application for this location. Last year, which was the first year, we did not have any complaints regarding the operation of this Christmas tree lot. All aspects of the application will remain the same as last year. There is, except for one change. Last year, the applicant had a trailer on site in which he stored supplies, and he kept that overnight. The zoning ordinance technically requires that any movable piece of equipment be moved at the end of each day. And the way I interpret that to mean is that anything on wheels must move. So I've made the applicant aware that if he has a trailer on site, it must be removed at the end of the business day. He has asked if he could have something like a 8x8 storage building or a pod, and I have made him aware that those would not be prohibited by the zoning ordinance as long as one of those options was acceptable to the Board of Zoning Appeals. It would be at the rear of the Christmas tree lot behind the actual trees, and it would whichever option he goes with would be used to store their equipment for the selling season. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and the recommended conditions remain the same two conditions, and they're listed in the staff comments.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Blomley. Any questions for Mr. Blomley? All right. Mr. Onks, anything you'd like to add to this one? Oh. All right. All right.
We'll put a building in there. That's no problem. But the trailer's just too big for us to move. It's really not an eyesore or anything. I mean, if it's the wheel aspect, I'd certainly take the wheels off my trailer. You know, I mean, the property owner is okay with us being there. I know the city ordinance says whatever Matt just described it says, but it's more of it shows more that we're Boy Scouts there than putting up a temporary building. We'll certainly abide by whatever y'all decide. You know, building just costs me more money to build, and then I got to take it down. So we'll do whatever you guys tell us to do. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Did I introduce myself? I am Dan Onks with Troop 197.
All right. At this time, then, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application? Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed. Open the floor for further discussion or motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the application with the necessary conditions set by the staff.
Do we get the building?
Yeah.
I'm unclear on the building.
Yeah, what are you telling us? So he's got to move, if he brings the trailer with the Boy Scout stuff, they got to move it every night, is what we're saying, right?
Per the ordinance, that's what's required.
Okay.
If he has a non-stationary structure, though, you know, just like he has at the church, and just like Mr. Jones has at Kmart, then that could be placed there and could stay there for the duration of the selling season.
But is there any need for an additional condition to be placed on the approval?
No, he has expressed to me that those are one of the two options that he would go with. If the board is okay with either of those two options, then I can just work that out with Mr. Onks before he sets up. I think he's saying that it would be a small building as opposed to a pod.
Okay, I'll second.
All right. Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mr. Onks, those applications have been granted. Good. Thank you. And thank you for your patience with us.
It's too big to move. Thanks, man. Have a good day.
You too. All right. Now we're on to staff reports and any other business.
I have one item that I wanted to mention, kind of a pat on the back to the board members. It is October, and all of the board members have their required continuing education hours for the year of 2014. So let's give ourselves a round of applause.
Weak round of applause. All right. Any other business? If not, we're adjourned.